advise members all mobile phones must be set to airplane mode and on silent or turned off. It is not sufficient just to put your mobiles on silent mode as they continue to interfere with the assembly recording. And just to be aware, this session has been recorded in video and audio and can be accessed via online streaming either on the Assembly website or on Democracy Live. Okay, members, agenda item 1, apologies. At this moment in time we have no apologies. Does anybody else know of any?
Beckman may be here.
Will they record an apology just in case? If he comes, we can score it.
Aye.
Okay. Tighton Kearney. Agenda item 2, then, minutes of the meeting on the 1st of June. Can I refer members to the draft minutes of the meeting on the 1st of June as at pages 5 to 8 of your pack? Members, are you content that those are a true record of that meeting?
Yeah.
Great.
If so, I'll sign them as being accurate.
Oh, friend.
Members, agenda item 3, matters arising. There are no matters arising at this minute in time. So moving on to agenda item 4, correspondence. Could I refer members to a series of correspondence received and a number of associated papers in your pack from pages 11 to 20? Just like to advise members that this correspondence refers to a decision taken by the former Justice Minister, Mr David Ford, regarding his decision to close the Northern Ireland Law Commission from the 1st of April 2015. Just advising members that the issues raised around the accountability of the Minister are actually beyond the remit of this committee and would appear to be more relevant for the Justice Committee. Are members content that the correspondence is referred to the Justice Committee for its consideration and that the author of the letter is informed of this action?
Yeah.
Great.
Content. Thank you. Members, moving on then, agenda item 5 is the Clerk's brief. Can I just refer members to the memo from the Clerk at pages 22 to 35, which explains the memorandum of reply process. I just ask the Clerk to brief the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just a reminder from last week about the MOR, Memorandum of Reply, which is the Executive's formal response to a PAC report and mainly its recommendations. It is the Executive's formal response to the Assembly to the recommendations, and it is laid before the Assembly but gets considered by the PAC committee, and it's a very important part of the accountability process, and it's the document that will lay out what the department is intending to do in terms of recommendations. So it'll usually be whether they've been fully accepted, partially accepted or not accepted, and in those cases there will be an explanation as to why, and in the case where it has been fully or partially accepted, again there should be sufficient detail for the committee to ascertain whether they feel that sufficient action has been taken, and it will usually outline how it intends to implement the recommendations as well. So there are a number of these before the committee. Well, one today and 2 follow-ups in terms of correspondence. If the committee's not happy with any aspect of an MOR, the agreed process, which is laid out in a protocol, which is also contained in your pack, the protocol between PAC and DFP, is that the committee can write seeking further information or clarification on whatever aspects or queries that they have. If in the first instance the committee is not happy, they would write to the TOA, and if it progresses, it may need to be then forwarded on to the relevant accounting officer, and then ultimately, if the committee is still not satisfied, particularly if it's to do with areas that stray into policy, then that would be a member of the Minister for that particular department. So the process does work well, and in terms of timescales, the MOR is normally presented 8 weeks after a PAC report, and then it would be a matter then for the committee scheduling that for their forward work programme to consider. And another part of the process which the last committee did was they then would ask for a 12-month update on recommendations to see if they had indeed been implemented and whether there was any further action needed. So in terms of today, there's one MOR on the General Health Report, and then there's 2 other pieces of correspondence in relation to 2 MORs that have already been before the committee.
Okay, members, that's just really to set out what an MOR is. Have you any questions at this point or any clarification you require before we move on to the next 2? Okay, members content then. Agenda item 6 is an inquiry into the general report of the Health and Social Care sector 2012-13 and 13-14. Can I refer members to their memorandum of reply at pages 37 to 46 of your packs? Just advise members, the previous PAC made 13 recommendations in a report which was published on the 30th of January 2016 following an inquiry on the general report on the health and social care sector. And of the 13 recommendations, all have been accepted bar 1. Can I just invite Kieran Donnelly, or Controller and Auditor General, to the table at this stage? Members, just if you refer to page 43 is recommendation 7, which is the one that hasn't been accepted. And it was the committee recommends that the department clarify the expected time period over which it expects the benefits of TYC to be realised. Health and Social DHSSPS advises that this recommendation is accepted in principle, but it is difficult to provide an exact timescale as to when the full benefits of TYC will be realised. However, in November 2015, DHSSPS produced a second update on HSC actions to deliver the model of care set out in TYC. That report showed that 2.5 years into what TYC originally described as a 5-year programme of change, work on around 99 proposals have been completed, with good progress made on nearly all the rest. The authors of TYC have also acknowledged that the pace of change required to deliver the full transformation of health and social care service delivery is dependent on financial circumstances and the prioritisation of resources allocated by the Northern Ireland Executive to health. Can I ask members if they have any comments they wish to make on this MOR at this point? Okay, members, if nothing there, can I just ask the Audit Office, Kieran, have you any comments you wish to make on that MOR?
First, I think this is a very positive response overall as far as memoranda of reply go. So there's quite a lot of heavy recommendations in this that have been accepted. What's really important now is implementation as opposed to acceptance. So tracking the recommendations through here on in, I think will be important. The recommendations are wide-ranging. They cover things like the proposal for a 3-year budgetary regime, initiatives on consultant shortages, dealing with cancer waiting time targets where there's a huge problem, recommendations on performance indicators and making sure that we can do comparative work with other jurisdictions, all accepted. Also recommendations on direct award contracts, which didn't go through competitive tender, and to get a grip on that, so that's been accepted. Recommendations on paying invoices promptly, so they're wide-ranging. As regards transforming your care, that's a huge initiative, and I think that merits separate treatment. Now, we are doing a separate piece of work on that, and we'll talk to you on that later. So we're producing a full report on how transforming your care is going, and of course it's way behind the original targets, but all of that will need deeper consideration.
Okay, Trevor.
Thanks, Chair. I wasn't involved in this, so we're picking it up just as of now, you know, but if there's 99 recommendations and they say that about half of them have been completed, I wonder, frankly, is that the easy half? And I wonder about the big ones. You mentioned cancer waiting lists. I'm sure there's recommendations about other waiting lists. They're surely not trying to tell us that they've actually made progress by way of improvement in those situations.
You raise a very interesting question. I think one of the things that did strike us was just the sheer number, the volume of recommendations. Some are obviously more important than others.
Yeah.
And I think almost Transforming Your Care was used as a banner to capture a whole range of health service initiatives. So I think one of the things we'll probably be saying going forward, the initiative will need to be more focused.
Yeah.
That would be fair.
Yeah, I think the thing to recognise about the 99 recommendations is that they're all drawn up in a very, very wide-ranging way. They're quite ambiguous in ways. And one of the difficulties with TYC, as we found as it rolled out, was that there was a lack of any sort of really hard targets and milestones in it. So when they say they've achieved some of the recommendations and met the recommendations, that's okay in itself. But there's other work, I think, beyond that to be done.
Well, Chair, is it worthwhile to ask them to be a bit more specific on what they've actually achieved? Because when you say 99, we've done half of them. We're making good progress on most of the others. It's the ones that don't come into those two categories that would worry me.
I think maybe as Kieran was saying, we're in a process of producing a report on TYC, and I think all the issues you raise will be covered by that, and you'll have a better go at it whenever you see the full detail of it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay. Robbie?
I would just like to pick up on Trevor's point there, because again, I'm new to this, and I'm just looking at some of the responses which state that the DHSPS accepts the recommendation and it reflects existing practice. So that to me says that whilst they have looked at 50% of the recommendations, or a lot of those were already in place anyway, so there perhaps wasn't any progress needed to be made. And as Trevor had pointed out, what level of work has then happened since this report was given to them?
Well, that's hugely important. I think accepting is one thing, is actually looking at what's happening on the ground. I think what you could do here, and some of the often the committee will write out for a progress report. Some of these are hugely important, so having a progress report maybe 6 months' time might be a good idea.
On that one, you'll see that they didn't say that it is an existing practice.
Yes.
It's more to do with the fact that it's difficult to provide an exact time scale. It almost seems as if TYC, I think, going forward, will have run its course and will maybe sort of just ebb into something else. As a reform programme goes forward, because TYC was a sort of a 5-year period, and we're nearly we are at the end of it. So it'll be interesting to see, I think, whenever our report comes out, on the way the department responds to it, and if you had a PIC session at that stage on it, you were able to tease enough a lot of these questions out with them, the detail of it.
Okay. Trevor?
Sorry, is it possible to, when you're doing your further investigation on this, to link it to the Donaldson report? By that time, 6 months' time, you'll have Professor Ben Goes.
Yeah, and all those issues.
Reports they ask about, so
yeah.
I mean, I'm not holding my breath here, frankly.
Donaldson has been a good anchor for the report as well, and Bengoa is referenced. I think it might be useful for us to meet with them before.
We were thinking of meeting with the Professor. His report understands imminent.
Yeah.
Supposed to be. Yeah.
Interestingly, the principles that he produced for his report were very, very similar to what was in TYC. So you sometimes in health you get the impression that things are just spinning round and round. And
Paris is
as if you never thought that.
Okay.
Chair, just on that, and thanks for your contribution. Obviously, as it says here, delivery was subject to financial circumstances and prioritisation of resources. So is there evidence of other demands within the health?
I think there is, because at the early stages, TYC, I don't have the figures, chapter and verse in front of me, but TYC was under budget. So there's a budget set aside, it wasn't spent, and the assumption is some of that had to go into the front line. Now, a lot of what's invest in transforming your care is classic invest to save. So you need upfront money. So you need to spend to actually get a return on it, and that's the conundrum here. It needs upfront money to actually move the process on.
And the difficulty really with it was, and the amazing point about it was, that the TYC was depending on in-year monitoring round money. There was wasn't an awful lot of dedicated funding to it for such a big programme that they were bringing into place. So going forward, I think, as I'll point out later in the brief, they have talked about now bringing in a transformation fund. So maybe there will be a bit more dedicated funding.
Now, your predecessors touched on this. We had a report just before the election on Invest to Save. I suppose one of the things came up that some of the funding that was earmarked for Invest to Save projects in health were actually shifted into emergency funding for other things. So that was something we had to keep an eye on. So if there is a specific transformation fund, it's really important that that resource is then ring-fenced and there's actually transparency on that.
It is, Chairman, I think it's somewhat disappointing. A lot of it involved a culture change, transforming your care and how business was done.
Absolutely, absolutely.
There's one that sat on the health committee for some time in this room. Well, we were under the impression that transforming your care was going to transform the health service, but unfortunately it hasn't delivered. And I suppose the biggest issue is the need for funding.
No, I wouldn't say. I say there's. Be fair to say, Sean, there's some evidence of a bit of a cultural shift, particularly a lot of the philosophy on transforming your care is bottom up, as opposed to command and control from the top. And there's some evidence of good projects coming from the ground up. Yeah. I suppose the question of scaling those up.
It is. I think quite often with TYC projects, they happen in an ad hoc way, and they don't seem to be scaled up and pushed out and disseminated would be one of the things we've found as well on them, so... But
certainly there'll be an opportunity for a much fuller and deeper debate on this when we do that report.
Okay, Michelle?
Thanks, Chair.
I look forward to seeing the full report as well, and I have to say there was a time when I felt that the acronym stood for taking your chances as opposed to transforming your care. I was on the health committee with Trevor McGordon when this came out and had questioned Minister Pouts on the money, the finances that would be required to bring about that shift, and if they were talking about moving people out of hospitals, out of care homes and back into the community and back into their own homes, there had to come a package of money of domiciliary care and of support for that person to make that change, and it was very hard to get answers around what kind of budget was shifting across to do that work.
Yeah, at a very high level, there was 83 million was supposed to be shifted across, and they were supposed to have that done over the time scale of TYC. The current estimate is that they'll not even be anywhere near in 2018. I'll have the figure here, but they're still quite. I think it'll only be 60 odd million by 18, whereas it's supposed to be 83 million. So it has been very, very sluggish in doing all the things you say. Yeah.
Okay, members. We've veered, I suppose, into where we would like to see the TYC review coming rather than coming off the MOR, but I think that was useful coming out of that. So, members, just come back to maybe Kieran's recommendation to come back in 6 months' time to look at the implementation of the recommendations that we actually have coming out of this report. Recommendation 4 in regard to waiting times, I think, would be worth keeping a strenuous eye on.
Yeah.
That's a particularly acute problem. There's an urgency to deal with it, so I'll be interested to see what they've got to say in 6 months' time.
Okay.
Just on that, Chair. Thanks, Chair. Just from a previous experience, the data that's collected in relation to waiting times, I feel there are a lot of inaccuracies within it. The different trusts and even the board had different systems in place, and I think the whole thing needs to be looked at in the round, and that data needs to be analysed. We need consistent data. There were huge inconsistencies that sprang out of what the information that was produced, and I often think a large section of the community are waiting on that waiting list, and they're on it. We hear about the top line figures, but I think it needs to be prioritised. It needs to be made clear, and I think the data itself needs to be closely analysed.
Oh, so okay. So you have concerns about the integrity of?
Yes, I think it really needs to be challenged.
That's something
Well,
Yeah, we can think
Are
about
you
it.
thinking numbers on waiting lists or times or?
What numbers is particularly? Your numbers on waiting lists?
you would think the annual, or not the annual, but the monthly and the periodic issue of statistics from the department.
Yeah,
You
yes, that's
feel-
right.
You
yeah.
feel, okay.
But I think, sorry, is that through trust to trust, I think, was your concern?
Yes,
you
it
were talking about?
does. Yeah, well,
Not trust to trust as well, how they
Yeah,
actually
how
collect the
they do
data.
that, yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's one of our big concerns, that absolutely collection systems should be consistent across the trusts. There's no question about that. That's something I think we would.
I couldn't honestly give you
But you know, there's a team of expert statisticians in the department, and that's something that
yeah,
having open up dialogue with them.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, members content?
One more, you mind?
Trevor?
Sorry, I'm looking at recommendations 5 and 6, where the department accepts the recommendation that reflects existing practice. Like if you looked at it, Karen, and then we looked at it, and we come up with a recommendation to change existing practice, they can just say it reflects what we're already doing.
sometimes these things will run, you know, if we look at it and they're putting it in place just as we come in.
All right.
So that can happen at times. Wouldn't have happened, of course, if we didn't have come in and given them the choice.
Off
what I'd
departments will say those. We were doing that anyway, or we
Yeah.
were just about to do it. So you get a bit of that.
So you're happy with that?
No, we want to push them down that road.
6 months.
Yeah, that the real important thing is that they actually sit back and analyse the trends, and there's proper consideration where there is good practice and how that could be rolled out wider, that's embedded. That's a real issue.
Okay. Karen, thank you. Sean, thanks for your
Thank
input on that. Members, moving on then, agenda item 7 is the inquiry on the cross-border broadband initiative that was referred to as the Bytel project. Can I just refer members to the MOR update from Deputy Permanent Secretary at pages 50 and 51? It's an inquiry into a cross-border broadband initiative. The report was highly critical of the handling of the cross-border project delivered by a private company, Bytel Networks Limited, which was funded by a special EU programmes body and supervised by the Department of Trade, Enterprise, Trade and Investment in Northern Ireland and by the Department of Communications, Energy and Natural Resources in the Republic of Ireland. Just advise members that in October 2004 the JIAs offered funding of €4.3 million to Bytel against an estimated total project of €12.4 million. Actual project costs were significantly lower. Bytel incurred eligible costs of only €0.9 million, but was paid all of the €4.3 million assistance between December 2004 and December 2005. It was clear that grants were hugely overpaid. Advise members that this update refers to a PAC report published on the 2nd of October 2015 in which 8 recommendations were made, 7 of which were fully accepted by DETI. Recommendation 7 stated that the DETI Commission a PACE, which is a Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984 investigation of the Bytel project as a matter of urgency. It stipulated that the investigation should focus on establishing whether any individuals bore responsibilities for the shortcomings within the project and whether there was any evidence of misconduct or criminal activity either inside or outside the department. DETI petitionally accepted this recommendation and agreed to consider it further in light of the relevant evidence, some of which at the time was not available. The MOR update from DETI now advises that there is no evidence to suggest that any escalation of the investigation would be worthwhile and would not provide any new insights beyond evidence already given to the committee. Members wish to comment on that at this stage, or ask Karen, could we have...
Just a couple of points. It's a complex case and it's an historic case, but in the process of our inquiry would come across an email from an outside whistleblower that suggested improper or misconduct or improper behaviour. That wasn't escalated at the time, and there were various investigations into this. What we were saying, and the committee endorsed this, that there should have been what's called a PACE investigation, an investigation done under criminal standard. Had they done that at the time, there had been more opportunity to get underneath this. Notwithstanding all of that, because of the gravity of the issues, the committee said, even at this late stage, you should do a PACE investigation, which they did at various interviews, but they haven't really got very far with it because people's memories had lapsed and someone can remember what happened X years ago. Now, I have had 2 meetings with the Permanent Secretary on this, and I think the one positive thing is the Permanent Secretary personally was heavily engaged on this, and after those couple of conversations, I'm happy that they can't really get any further on this, but the real lesson was when these type of things come up, investigate them at the time. And there was important recommendations really come out of the committee, including for the creation of a central fraud unit, and that's now up and running. But the real reason for bringing this historic case to the committee, or one of the main reasons, was the deficiency in the original investigations. So we can't really do anything more at this remove, I think, now that we've got to the end of the road on it.
Okay. Can I just, who was the Permanent Sec?
The Permanent Secretary was Andrew McCormick.
No.
Sorry?
At present?
At present, and also when we had the PAC session, it was Andrew McCormick. Yeah.
No, go ahead. Sorry, in regards then the central fraud unit that has been created, I just asked, what detail have you in that? What size, scope?
It's very small at the minute, but and it's been doing some case work. Its head is, I think, grade 6, so that is more status and stature than previously departments did their own. Some departments would have had PACE trained people, others didn't, so it was actually to bring together that resource in one place. Now it doesn't have a huge resource, but at least it can pick out, you know, where investigations sometimes can go wrong at an early stage, and where maybe there's strong prima facie evidence of say wrongdoing because of a botched investigation. People need to know what they're at on investigations in terms of being trained properly. That's the main thing here. And the original investigations on this way back in the day weren't really up to scratch.
Okay. That central fraud unit, who's it reporting to? It's in the Department of Finance?
It's in the department, so it'll be normally to under David Sterling. So, and I think they have some quite unusual lines of reporting, but other permanent secretaries can commission it to do work, and so they've been doing work right across the piece.
Unusual lines of reporting.
It's unusual lines, yes, yeah, but it's located in DFP, but it doesn't, in a sense, if it's work, it can be working for, you know, any permanent secretary across the piece.
But I assume then the Permanent Sec of the EFP still has overall control. Do they have
Well, the Permanent Secretary of the DFP wouldn't get involved in the detailed casework that they do, but in terms of making sure it's, you know, properly resourced, etc., that would be his duty.
Could the Minister of Finance get involved, even if it wasn't an investigation within the Department of Finance?
I would doubt it. No, I wouldn't have thought so. Yeah.
Okay, Michelle.
Gormagad Cahirlock. This is dating back to 2006, and I had raised with you, Kieran, last week about the possible need for a look into how public money has been spent in delivering broadband, and this is, I suppose, very unfortunate in that there's a cross-border broadband initiative. You'd imagine that would have been welcomed by all and sundry, because it would have picked up a lot of those people who are in cross-border or border areas that won't still have any kind of broadband cover. And I accept what you've said so far about the Internal Audit and Fraud Investigation Service, but given that this was a cross-border initiative, were there any investigations carried out, or what was the level of cooperation from Dublin, and from whether or not there was any kind of sense? I don't think any of us are across the detail, but was there investigations done down south as
There
well?
were, yeah. The loss of public money was joint. It was on both sides of the border. So I worked closely with my counterpart in the Irish CNAG in Dublin. So we worked together on this initiative. He actually came up to address, in fact, we had the PAC from Dublin up here.
Okay.
And we addressed both committees. There was a division of labour. Our committee looked at certain aspects, and the Dáil committee looked at other aspects. So there was a cross-border dimension to that inquiry.
And both
Uh,
PAC
no.
committees did reports at that time. Both PAC committees actually produced reports at that time.
Yeah.
And do we know then at this stage how much of the money that was set aside, how much of the pot was actually spent on delivering service?
Right, okay. We'll have to distinguish here between what was delivered and the way it was delivered. The actual project actually delivered what it said on the tin. There was actually, it did the job technically. The problem was the level of grant that was paid to enable to do that was far more generous than was needed. So the grant that was paid out was actually more than the project cost. That was a real issue. But the project actually delivered on better broadband. And I think, if my memory's right, it was in that whole arc, well, sort of Dundalk, right round. And I think there was a western arc to it as well. Yeah. But that was at that time. Broadband has moved on a lot since that.
For some people.
For some, yeah. Now, there may be a wider issue on other pots of public money that have gone into speeding up broadband and how that has worked out. We haven't looked at that. So it was the governance around this specific project was our concern.
Okay, Trevor?
I would just expand on that, Chair. I mean, following on from what CNAG has said, I mean, even some of it focused around equipment that was purchased that actually had of no monetary value. It was actually redundant equipment, and a huge amount of money was spent on that. So, I mean, I was really trying just to add to what the CNAG was saying. So, it wasn't particularly about broadband per se, but it was about that process and how there was a suggestion about two companies that was actually from the north here, from Northern Ireland here, and how that equipment had been used from one company, but it was actually redundant from another company, and it had no real purpose in the amount of money that was spent, and actually wasn't used for the project at all.
So we're talking about really dodgy grant claims. That was really
Kieran, has the Committee for Finance been briefed on by Telgino?
Sorry, our committee here, not that I am aware of. No.
Okay. Okay. Right. Okay. Members, anything else? Gordon?
Thanks, Robin. Just a couple of issues as I see it. There are two things really. The controls and procedures, are they in place now for the management of such grants? Is that part of it? And the other one obviously is the investigation processes that you've said were weak. Now both of those I believe we need to have corrective actions put in place to stop recurrence.
You're absolutely right. Those are the two key points. Very well, the controls thing was quite worrying because on paper you had a whole tier of controls. You had, which even included SEUPB. Now we had SEUPB here as witnesses to the committee, and they were saying they were kept in the dark on some of this. There was when problems arose, the little unit that dealt with it tended to close in on itself, and the points of concern weren't reported to all the relevant stakeholders. Had that happened, the system as a whole could have got a grip on this earlier. So there was a real issue of communication between all of the stakeholders, and the business unit in DETI kept tight on this and didn't reveal the problems elsewhere. Now, under the rules, SEUPV should have been fully in the loop, and others, and the parent department. So there is lots of lessons out of this in terms of when something does go wrong, who needs to know about it and how is that reported. instead of, in a sense, there was a whiff of cover-up on this one. And that, it was because of that whiff of cover-up was the reason we decided to publicly report on it. There was also a loss of EU funds as well. There's another strand to it.
You're satisfied that all is now done that can be done at this stage, but the important thing is that the reoccurrence does not take place.
Well, absolutely. I'm never satisfied. We have to keep tracking these things, and sometimes you do get repeat occurrences. So we just need to be very, very alert that the controls are applied in practice. It's one thing having controls on paper. It's another thing making sure they're working on the ground.
The processes should be there.
The processes are, and often when we find things that are wrong, the processes are there, but they're not really working on the ground, and it's where human behaviour comes into the loop.
So that's where internal audit has its place.
Internal audit is the place, yes.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Chair, I fear, I mean, between this memorandum and the previous one, that we're straying into actually regurgitating every other one that we've looked at before. I think if some members are on here a while, they'll realise that this won't be unique to this particular investigation, should it even be down to internal audit within some of the public sector organisations. So I think we're straying into an area that we're actually going to start and reopen, have a conversation about Bytel or other ones that we have actually done. And I mean, that's what sort of worrying, just the way this is going in terms of conversation.
Trevor, where I have a new committee around here at the minute. So
yeah, but that's why I'm trying to elaborate on that, Chairman, because
we have time today just to. Why we have Kieran in front of it.
But I think they will see a culture of this committee that, to be fair to the CNAG, everything that comes is going to be full of the same as what we've just heard, almost. I mean, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but we're finding this with all the public sector organisations that come in terms of the faults and the errors that's there, and we're obviously trying to work with CNAG and the departments to fix that. But if we get into an awful lot of detail like that, we're going to actually miss getting on to some of the good stuff. Because this is history now.
Well, it's not the full 12-month update is actually due in October.
Yeah.
When all the recommendations will be reported on, so we will be coming back on it.
But previously we've done ones in the Fire and Rescue Service.
Yeah.
When we come back and we actually had learned nothing from that, so we get another go at that. We've still time to do this.
Yeah.
But I mean, I just feel the way we're going today that we're actually getting into the debate about actually what went wrong at that particular time.
I'm happy to have that conversation at this minute in time, Trevor, with the number of members that are around the table for the first time. And I know you've been through the whole investigation at that with the Controller and Auditor General, but I was just to give other members around the table the field to question where we are on this MOR at this minute in time. So I appreciate your patience. I know you think you can maybe can overrule ground, but it's just for other members' sake when we have Kieran in front of us on this issue. So, members, anything else? Kieran, I just advise members the full 12-month update is due in October when all the recommendations will be reported on, so our members content we come back at that stage.
Great, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, members, moving on then to agenda item 8 is inquiry into DRD, the effectiveness of public transport. And can I refer members to the correspondence at page 53 to 55 from the head of the Civil Service in respect of clarification the previous committee had sought around a response to a recommendation made in its inquiry into the effectiveness of public transport. The clarification sought was concerning car parking policies within the Northern Ireland Civil Service. I just ask members if they have any comments they wish to make on this one. Okay, closed session. Okay, members, we will be moving into closed session for the rest of this. So.